and welcome to Wizards vs. Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. And this very special episode is the first annual Wizzly Awards, a gimmick that I have stolen from several other podcasts, including Crime and Sports' Scummies and the Old School Wrestling Review's Golden Noggers. So shout out to those people. In this episode...
I just thought an awards show sounded cool.
Yes, thank you for agreeing to it. In this episode, Alexis and I will put forth our nominations for victory in a number of categories, and as a impartial observer, Lee,
our PH Lee, our special recurring
our
guest,
bonus episode maven, will judge between the two of them, even though they have not read any of the books. So
they've not read most of the books. They've read some of the books.
If Lee expresses any problematic opinions, it is out of ignorance. Please do not cancel Lee.
I have absolutely no expertise or basis for judgment. I just really want to emphasize that.
Yes, we just sort of drafted poor Lee. Please do not hold anything that happens in this podcast against them.
Yes, indeed. So that's where we're at. I think that without further ado, let us just steam on in.
Yes.
Lee, will you introduce the first award, please? And Alexis and I will put forward our nominations. It's time for the main awards. This contains spoilers for everything we've done an episode on so far.
All right, the first award on this sheet of paper I've been handed just now is for Best Wizard.
Best Wizard. And my nomination for Best Wizard is Sathenai Belthandros. Belthandros Sathenai from The Unspoken Name. Alexis, who are you putting forward?
So, I tried to think of some other good candidates, like Jod from Harrow the Ninth, or I guess the Empress from The Empress of Forever, who I actually think is a surprisingly good wizard figure, but no, it's obviously got to be Belthandros.
Easy job for you this time.
I guess it's Belthandros. That's very good. I do have to say, The Unspoken Name is one of the books which I've read part of. So most of the books on the podcast I have not read, but this is one of the ones which I read part of it. And I was so creeped out by Belthandros. He was so effectively rendered that I was unable to continue reading. So kudos.
Excellent.
Great job.
Yes. Not only is Belthandros an actual wizard, but unlike so many of our other wizards, but he really defined the parameters of what wizard means for this podcast with his gaslighting, with his creepy use of other people's information, with his obsession with immortality. And his grooming and his sociopathy, and the list goes on.
He's pretty much the epitome of what the wizard figure should be.
And even when you beat him, you haven't really beaten him. He just sort of kind of gets distracted and goes off. Mm-hmm. Terrible, and therefore best.
Yes.
So kudos, and that is one Wizzly for the Unbroken at this point. I'm going to keep...
No, for the Unspoken Name, not for the Unbroken.
Next year, we're going to do a category for most generic name for a novel. But I've been steered away from the meaner awards this time around.
Yes, I'm also noting for our poor audience that we've disqualified the retros as candidates because they are just too powerful.
Yes.
And they would win too many awards.
That is correct. All right. I'm going to let you do... you know what? Best lesbian. Alexis, would you like to go first for this one?
Sure. So another good category, I think. I think it's kind of got to be Gideon. I think that Gideon is probably our best lesbian. I did consider Xorway, but I feel like it's unfair to give the Unspoken Name Best Wizard and Best Lesbian. Xorway's pretty good though.
I see.
And those were my two primary candidates for that. And Baru Cormorant, because I think that she so well typifies the disaster lesbian.
All right. So we have a nomination for Gideon. I also considered Kasorwe. She was my first thought. But I have elected to go with Karis from Fire Logic.
But Fire Logic is a retro.
God damn it. Okay, so I'm going with
No,
Kisorwe.
otherwise it would definitely be Karis. It would either be Karis or Rainbow. See, this is what I mean. This is why we can't let the retros
I'm gonna have to
compete.
fix a few of my nominations here as we go. All right. So yes, now I'm putting forward Kisorwe, and both of these are butch lesbians. Let's start out that way. But mine is an orc, and she has tusks. And
that's true.
And even
but
though
mine has titty mags.
That's true. Gideon has a porn
and
habit.
a broadsword
And a sword. I mean, Kisorwe also has a sword.
Kisorwe also has a sword, but Gideon has a massive two-hander.
Yes, and talks like Dave from Homestuck. Whereas
And
Kisorwe's friend talks like Dave from Homestuck. Kisorwe doesn't talk like Dave from Homestuck, which I think is possibly superior in the lesbian sweepstakes.
Oh gosh, I can't believe that I am in the position of having to make this decision. A decision that I must reiterate I am in no way qualified to make. Basically it comes down to who talks like Dave from Homestuck and whether that's a positive or a negative. So
I would also like to argue in favor of Gideon that Kisorwe has a brief crush on one girl and then, absolutely nothing, and then falls for Shuthmili, which is a good arc. But Gideon spends much of her book being sort of pulled by various interesting women, many of whom turn out to be evil.
Kisorwe is also interested in the hot older witch lady, might I add.
Is she?
Yeah.
Is she really?
Yeah. We wouldn't know that the older witch lady was hot if Kisorwe didn't notice.
That's reasonable. Okay, that's fair. I'm still gonna vote for Gideon because I think that she's a great lesbian figure, but I do have to admit that Kisorwe is a pretty strong contender.
I think I'm gonna have to go with Gideon.
All right, that's one for the Night House.
If only just so that the unspoken name doesn't sweep every category.
Because really the unspoken name does, I think, best exemplify in so many ways the Wizards versus Lesbian micro genre.
All right.
So obviously, given that this is Wizards versus Lesbians, our third category is best conflict.
Okay.
Between a wizard and a lesbian, clearly.
I will go with Harrow versus John. I think that the particular avenues of attack that John has on Harrow, his dadness, his just appalling dadness, in combination with his nuclear gaslighting, and the fact that she can't even really get his attention by exploding one of his oldest friends in front of him using an explosive stew made of her own body. And that his one concession to her humanity is eventually figuring out that she doesn't like to drink tea is why I put forward John versus Harrow. And John is incidentally the undying king of the universe. And Harrow is a lesbian.
See, I seriously considered John versus Harrow, and the reason why I decided against it is that Harrow at no point actually sees herself in conflict with John.
Well, until the very end, I suppose.
No, because at the very end, she has relinquished control of her body to Gideon.
That's true. All right, what is your nomination then?
I mean, if we weren't just letting the unspoken name sweep everything, obviously it would have to be Kisorwe versus Belthandros. Just to be somewhat contrary, I'm also going to nominate Empress of Forever, actually, because I think this is a story about a woman who conquers the wizard within herself and allows the lesbian to shine through. And this is like an entirely internal conflict because the titular Empress of Forever is also Viv.
Right. So this is Vivian Liao versus her future self, who is the immortal queen of the universe.
Yes.
Well, as much as I love the wizard lesbian versus herself form of the Wizards versus Lesbians conflict, I think I have to give it to Kisorwe versus Belthandros, which you sort of sneakily also nominated there, Alexis.
No, I said, I think we should discuss our runners up because, otherwise it's gonna all be the unspoken name and Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth.
Lee has spoken. Kasori versus Belfandros wins.
All right, Kasori versus Belfandros. That's fair.
Despite the fact that neither was nominated. All right. Best
This is a really well-run award show.
No, this is
great.
Professional trucks, as I would say on my other podcast. My dad once told me that my other podcast, Trucks, was starting to sound pretty professional. And that's not really what I do. What I do is more like this. And so every time I do something that's particularly like this, I say professional trucks. Professional trucks. Best romance. It's Alexis to go first.
It's my turn to go first. This one was kind of hard for me because, as we've established, romance is not actually.
Yeah, it's not really the focus of most of these books.
Of this microgenre. So I think that I really wanted to nominate Mahit 3 Seagrass because I love them, but they're not actually particularly romantic. They just have the most interesting relationship. But so actually I'm going to nominate them anyway. Because I really like them, and because because their relationship spanning over 2 books is actually, there's a lot more going on than just mutual attraction, that they have to navigate all these complicated dynamics of major diplomatic incidents and fighting with, warfare with aliens and, a huge cultural gap, and, all these sort of, and the possible colonization of Mahit's homeland by 3 Seagrass. And it doesn't actually get resolved, but in some ways the relationship gets resolved because, they are able to sort of find this core of really liking each other.
All right. I will nominate Harrow versus Gideon because Harrow and Gideon were the only 2 children their age who grew up in this horrible nunnery, essentially, manned by actual and almost dead people and no real authority figures. They hated each other and fought bitterly and abused each other as hard as they could through their entire teenage years. And then this mutual hatred blossomed into a extraordinary romance, which was finally admitted to in a scene where they both had to get into a giant swimming pool full of salt water for reasons and get all wet in order to confess their feelings for each other. And
but they
at
don't
which
confess
point
their feelings for each other.
They do. At which point
they do not.
Harrow could very much confess their feelings for Gideon. At which point they, have this whirlwind 2-day romance before Gideon dies by her own hand, impaling herself on a railing. At which point her brain is sucked into Harrow's brain. At which point Harrow lobotomizes herself in order to keep Gideon from being absorbed into her own consciousness, giving herself amateur brain surgery by the third wheel of this love triangle. I got too excited and I dropped my pen. And then, has Gideon narrate at her about how stupid this is for an entire book before Gideon finally is allowed to regain control of her body, and then puts Harrow to bed in a sepulcher in the inside of her own brain with a titty mag to keep her company, and goes out to save the universe.
It's a pretty good thing, except that I would like to reiterate, at no point do they ever say, I love you. At no point do they ever, hold hands.
They kiss!
Do they?
Yes.
I don't think they do. No, Gideon kisses Harrow on the forehead while she reiterates their commitment to this, divine, to what turns out to be a divine suicide pact.
One flesh, one end. I mean, you can't get more romantic than that. They both try so hard to die for each other, and they both think that each other is so stupid for trying to die for each other. And so most of the conflict is them trying to prevent the other person from dying for them.
See, I'm going to cheat a little bit by noting that the Gideon-Harrow dynamic is a lot like the Utena-Anthi dynamic, to which Lee has at many points suggested is not necessarily lesbian.
Oh,
Well.
goodness.
It's not a good idea to attack the judge. Well, there's
My
one right
blatant
answer to
appeal
this.
to the judge's own.
Yeah, that might backfire on you.
It might. That's
I did
fine.
just listen to your Tenna episode, so I have a lot of arguments regarding that currently ricocheting through my mind. I would just like to note that I believe the authors of these two books are exes.
It's true.
And you have made me decide which of them has best romance.
Well,
I'm not happy about this.
Oh, that's fair.
So I'm calling it a tie.
Should-
a tie. It's a tie, ladies and gentlemen.
It's a tie. That's fair. That's fair.
and yes. That's
If we were doing retros, I would nominate Fire Logic.
Okay, maybe this next one will be less contentious. Best love interest.
I don't know. See, I don't know. I keep trying to pick the more contentious option just for the entertainment value.
All right.
Best love interest. You get to go first this time.
It's 3 Seagrass, obviously.
Yeah, it's obviously.
Ta-da! It's 3 Seagrass. All right.
Thank you for saving me the pain.
Okay.
Oh no, actually, just to be somewhat contrary, and because I think there's a pretty good argument for Ma Xiaoying
Yes, Ma Xiaoying is also
of She Who Became the Sun.
is also good.
She's a great love interest. I mean, I can't. I'm gonna stick with nominating 3 Seagrass because I love her. But Ma Xiaoying, I would just honorable mention should go to her because she is a fantastic character.
Indeed. I agree. All right, so on to what we decided to call most developed setting, which I initially called best fantasy Asian country, but was told that wasn't
Where I
acceptable.
pointed out that it's kind of racist.
And
Okay, yeah. But most developed setting. That's a much better plan.
Most developed setting. Alexis, go first.
Most developed setting. I mean, you know what? Just because it hasn't, I was tempted to go with Taexcalon, but because it hasn't come up yet, I'm going to argue for the Hexer-Kit. The Hexer-Kit is a surprisingly well-developed setting.
It
It
is
is an extremely convincing dystopia, including the fact, as I've pointed out before, that it has personality tests that are extremely important and yet not actually accurate in any way, but can shape your career path. That's some good world building in a dystopia. And so,
Dystopian Myers-Briggs.
I think it manages to be both sort of, weirdly sort of hallucinatory, but also really feel like a place, and a deeply unpleasant place, but it really has a sense of place to it.
I nominated Taexcalon, which is, again, I think the obvious answer. And I would argue in favor of Taexcalon simply because the culture, the cuisine, the economic situation is laid out to a really impressive degree, and particularly because the empire versus colonized people dynamic is far, 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 far more fleshed out and complicated than it is in pretty much any of the other books. We don't have the empire bad, colonized people's virtuous.
This is because Arcadia
automatic.
Martine has a PhD in Byzantine history.
Yes, it works to her advantage in this setting.
It really does.
And while there are certain things about the planet Taexcalon themselves that don't make sense, the Hexer-Kit is a fever dream. And, that's good for that book, but it is something that kind of starts to lead into the problems that occur with the later books in the series as the internal logic of that fever dream begins to break down, I would argue. So I'm putting Taexcalon forward.
But I think that part of what makes the Hexer-Kit such a well-developed setting is that because it's such a fever dream, and with that, Yoon does a surprisingly good job with a lot of small details in establishing a setting. I mean, I love Taexcalon. I love those books, but it's pages and pages and pages and pages of world building. And, you know, Yoon manages to do that with, like, a few brush strokes, you know? Like, the Kel really love kimchi, for example. The fact, you know, there are farms, and farming is kind of romanticized, and so Jadao can sort of lean on being a farm boy, despite the fact that he actually grew up on, like, an agricultural research farm. So I want to put in a good word for the Hexer Kit, which is, you know, not gonna get as many nominations in these awards as, you know, as reflects my deep affection for those books.
All right, Lee.
I'm completely biased in favor of anything that Yoon Holly writes, so I'm giving it to the Hexer Kit.
It's the Hexer Kit. All right.
It's the Hexer Kit.
Okay, the Hexer Kit it is. What do we have next here? The Whale Award for the most disruptive plot twist. It's the Whale!
Another one where the retros...
Yeah, the retro must be disqualified because the whale would win this award, which is why we've named this award after the whale. Sorry, but I interrupted you. What were you saying?
I was just saying that about the retros, and honestly, this has made me realize, because, you know, I think several of the retros could compete fairly well for this, and it has made me realize that one of the things that a lot of the fiction today is, you know, the average standard of fiction today is much better crafted, but sometimes I miss the just complete weirdness of the fiction of bygone days.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm 100% in agreement about that. Let's see here. You went first last time.
I did want to, just to go back briefly to most developed setting. Mm-hmm. I would like to put a shout out for honorable mention to Malaysia in Blackwater Sister. Extremely well developed setting.
Yeah, it's just Malaysia.
I definitely, you know, I definitely feel like Malaysia's a real country.
All right.
Sorry.
Just for anyone listening who might not know, Malaysia is a real country.
Yes, this book takes place in Malaysia. The only difference is that there are ghosts. Okay, and gods.
For all we know.
Yeah, exactly. That might just be Malaysia. All right.
So sorry.
I think it is my...
We were at the Whale Award.
It is my turn to nominate first. I am going to... This might be recency bias, but I'm going to nominate the Girls of Paper and Fire, which will have come out by the time this comes out. No, it won't, you dummy. These awards are a farce. I'm going to nominate the love interest girl from the harem of the Bull King, who keeps these underage human girls to essentially rape repeatedly. That one of those girls turns out to be the last survivor of a super ninja clan, with the power of her super ninja abilities that makes her, like, eyes turn white in her blood, and that the way they escape the harem is being rescued by a giant owl man who somehow carries them both away, despite the fact that he is a man just with owl wings, and he cracks wise a lot while he does this. He's like the comedy Jar Jar character of the proceeding in the book that is like 90% dread about sexual assault. That is my nomination for the Whale Award.
That's a strong nomination.
I must add honorable mention for Green, for like so many things about Green, but in particular the healing underage lesbian BDSM, and also the masturbation lightning magic.
Yeah, the masturbation lightning magic, which isn't even super of a plot twist, but is definitely disruptive. See, this is what I mean by the retros are too, you know, this is why we had to disqualify the retros. You know, I thought about something from Light from Uncommon Stars, but I can't really call any of those things disruptive.
The book is already disrupted, pretty much.
Like, Light from Uncommon Stars is all twists, kind of, and so it's not really, you can't really call it disruptive.
And that episode hasn't gone up yet either.
I decided, and I owe Leora thanks for helping me decide this, that my nomination for Best Disruptive Plot Twist is The City in the Middle of the Night, where...
the city itself.
You know, Well, it is the actual city in the middle of the night where, you've got this thing where you're traveling between two political systems and she's talking to the aliens and, but like it's a lot about the different, politics of the city. And then suddenly she goes off to the alien city and comes back as Tentacle Jesus.
She does. And the particular way in which this sort of glorifies, the natives of this planet, in a really uncomplicated and sort of unlooked at way. I'm with you on that one, also. So like, I'd be happy if either of these were to win.
Me too, honestly. These are both strong candidates.
So in the spirit of the award, and also as a cautionary tale for not vesting absolute power in somebody who has absolutely no expertise or responsibility, I'm not giving it to either of them. I'm giving it to the whale, because the award is named after the whale.
But that's a retro one, which is disqualified.
I'm the judge.
Ben has given the whale award to the whale from...
All right, that's fair. That is fair. Okay, so Lee, as the judge, has decided that the whale award should actually go to the whale, even though it's a retro. Fair enough.
From a book which is called...
The Fortunate Fall.
The Fortunate Fall, thank you.
By Raphael Carter. And you know what? That's fair, because it really is a disruptive plot twist.
It's more disruptive than either of the things that we just said, even though that's stiff competition, I would say.
It is.
All right, the next award, Best Token Good Guy.
All right, this is my turn to go first.
Yep, and actually I should have paired this with Best Misandrist, or Most Misandrist, which we'll...
We can do that next.
The ones
we can do that next.
Exactly. But anyway, yes, go ahead.
My nomination for Best Token Good Dude has got to be the bandit brother, the former monk bandit brother in She Who Became the Sun.
Ooh, that's a really good one.
He's a genuinely good dude. He's not perfect. When he's a monk, he sleeps around. After he becomes a bandit, he does some things he regrets, but like he regrets them, and he's a supportive bro the entire time, both when he knows that his fellow monk is secretly a girl, and then, when his fellow former monk rises to become the, future ruler of the Ming, founder of the Ming Dynasty, he's just sort of there for her, and, fairly good-natured and tries to have a moral compass.
I'm actually going to withdraw my nomination and agree.
What was your nomination?
My nomination was the bandit from The Raven and the Reindeer who shoots the people who are pursuing them instead of the lesbian and her love interest at a crucial moment.
That's not a bad candidate. I mean, I still think that that the bro, that our former bandit bro, is better. But no, you're right. What's his face from The Raven and the Reindeer is not a bad candidate.
They're both bandits. But yeah, no, I will suggest giving it to the... Do we remember his name by any chance? The former bandit.
No,
did you find out his name before you nominated him? This is
he's the bandit.
This is all over how men are treated in this subgenre.
Yes, exactly. I don't need to remember the names of the male characters in these books.
But I agree. In part because the author had a specific note about how in a previous edit past, one of her readers was like, you need to put a man who isn't an asshole in this book. And she did. And that was the man. So because he was put in specifically for this reason, I think that you win.
I mean, obviously I don't have a say in this because you both agree, but I just...
Shuda, that's his name.
Shuda, all right. But I just wanted to say, I as somebody, I haven't read She Who Became the Sun because I've been busy with other reading stuff, although I really do want to read it. But as somebody who really loved Water Margin, the vibe of Water Margin, but the amount of murder and horrible misogyny that those guys do in their bandit road to eternal brotherhood was a little upsetting. I'm very glad that somebody just decided to do the same thing, but less so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good book.
Yeah, no, he really has a Water Margin vibe, Bond of Eternal Brotherhood kind of vibe to him. He's just not a misogynist.
Yeah.
All right. So
and he feels bad when he murders.
Some of the Water Margin characters feel bad when they murder.
He feels genuinely bad about it.
Yeah, no, he's a good character. That book is really good, which we will return to later on. I am going to suggest that we just skip to Most Misandrist, and this is a whole for the book, not for a character in the book. which of the books that we've done is the most misandrist. And I think it's my turn to start, and it's The Unbroken.
The Unbroken?
Yep, that is the most misandrist book.
But there's like okay dudes in that thing.
No, there are not. That was the book that started me down this path. There are no good men in that book. 0 good men. And the men that there are just, I mean, there are children in that book who are male children who are good. But like, if you've passed puberty and you're a character in that novel, you are a cartoon villain. And it is
no, because there's like the guy who's under her command.
The what? Who?
In The Unbroken, there's the guy who's under her command.
Okay, of course we don't remember his name.
Because Terrain is is a lieutenant or something, and she's got her like division, and she's got her like best buddy. She's got her female like on again off again girlfriend, I think, and her best buddy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, he is sort of the token guy in that book, isn't he?
He's extremely forgettable.
But Gaston from that book is like so Gaston that it's almost, yeah.
I'm gonna nominate the Jasmine Throne.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a token good dude in that book, but he dies.
Yes, he does.
I guess there's also his friend. His friend lives, but like that is one where it's set up as there's where there's so many awful men in that book.
I want this to be awarded to a book where the lesbian main character is actively repulsed by men. And that's certainly true in The Unbroken. Is that also true in The Jasmine Throne? I don't remember.
No, I don't think so. It's not really... They're pretty much only into each other, so it doesn't really come up. No, Priya's really into women and obviously not into men. It's just that, like, her brother is... In both cases, their brothers are so awful.
Yep.
Like, one of them is, this manipulative wizard figure, and the other one is literally setting women on fire for giggles.
That's true. There's a lot of bastards to choose from. Can you separate these two nominations?
I don't even... This may come up a couple of times during this awards show. I'm having some ontological difficulty with the category. Because...
They're having ontological difficulty with the category.
Is it the book with the most awful men in it, collectively, or is it the book that expresses the most contempt for men?
I feel like
which I feel like are
book...
two different categories.
Right.
Yeah,
I feel like it's the book which I feel like that it's the book which most puts men upholds men as the sole source of the world's problems, or the major source of the world's problems.
And again, if that is the case, I would have to go with The Unbroken, because in the Jasmine Throne there was a previously extant matriarchy that was a commanding sort of like evil, not evil, but like definitely an imperial power. Whereas in the Unbroken, like all of the sort of wizard behavior, imperial stuff is put on Luca's parents and her brother and the male leaders of the colonial force.
I'm willing to concede that.
All right, so
good. I don't have to
awesome.
Make up my ontological
quandary
remains unresolved.
I have bullied my non-male podcast partner into giving me my pick for most misandrist. Awesome.
Yes. good job.
The wizards versus lesbian struggle continues.
I mean, that's how this is working out. All right, where are we now that we've skipped ahead? Best possessor.
Best possessor?
Yes. So
best possessing entity.
I feel like we're probably both about to say Jadao.
Yeah,
yep.
It's got to be Jadao.
Awesome, Jadao. That's another one for the next episode.
I am also just going to say Jadao, even though I'm not even a part of this nominating process.
Yeah.
We all agree, Jadao. Great.
Yeah, we don't even have to get into that. Jadao is fantastic and is also
yes.
a ghost in a lesbian's head.
Yes. Honestly, part of why I advocated for this category was because I felt like Jadao just deserved a shout out.
Indeed. All right, so least Homestuck is next on the list. I think Leora was responsible for this one.
No, that one was mine.
Okay.
Leora was responsible for best possessor. Like, Leora's suggestions are good. My suggestions are things like least Homestuck.
Yes. So unfortunately, my pick for this was Fire Logic, which I can't pick because
it's a retro.
Because it's retro, and that's also cheating because it came out before Homestuck existed.
Yeah, exactly.
So why don't you do yours first while I desperately think of which of the ones from contemporary times qualifies as least Homestuck, because they're all a little bit Homestuck, unfortunately.
I'm going to argue that The Raven and the Reindeer, it has a fundamental wholesomeness, which I think makes it very anti-Homestuck. And it has a lot of sort of wry humor, but it's not really, there's not a lot of irony.
You know what? And the fact that Ursula Vernon as a webcomic artist is the least like Andrew Hussey of any webcomic artist that I can think of, and is
That's
also
true.
his contemporary, and his predecessor and his successor. I will say yes. I will agree that Raven, and because I don't think it's going to get a shout out otherwise, apart from that one bandit who shot the right person.
I considered nominating Jana for best love interest, but I just love Three Seagrass too much.
So that one goes to The Raven and the Reindeer. Segue. And most disastrous couple is the next one on the list. Speaking of the Unbroken, I did Terrain, the captain of the Imperial Guard, and Luca, the queen of, or the captain of the Colonial Guard, rather, the subaltern, the Gurkha in this situation in fantasy Morocco, and Luca, the crown princess of France, who comes to govern the territory in person. Actually, it was fantasy Algeria, which is not in Asia either. This relationship causes multiple deaths. Literally, this relationship kills a lot of people. And that's why I think it's the most disastrous.
I considered nominating Mahit and Three Seagrass, again, because their relationship is marked by just sort of constant diplomatic incidents, including when Three Seagrass just shows up on Mahit's space station. And I also considered Baru Cormorant and Tain Hu, except that actually their relationship kind of goes exactly to plan. It's just awful. Mm-hmm. And then eventually I came around to, I really have to agree that it's
Thank you.
Terrain and Luca.
That's another one for the Unbroken, surprisingly. All right. Best frenemy.
Okay, so I'm going to be completely honest, and I mostly suggested this category because I feel like Tal deserves a shout out.
Yes, you invented this category specifically to nominate Tal from
but there
who
are
is just Dave Strider.
But there's also, because he's got his relationship with Sorway is kind of great. But there are some other good frenemy relationships in these books. Shout out to Amma from Blackwater Sister.
Yes.
She's a pretty good friend of me. And Bianca in the City of the Middle of the Night, who's more on the enemy side, but
I would like to put forward.
Also Gideon and Harrow.
Sure.
Their relationship. They could either of them could be best frenemy of each other.
Yes. It's cool that you can put that forward in the same for the same people who co-won the best romance category. But my nomination for best frenemy is Zanj.
Zanj is that. She's a strong contender, yeah.
Because the book that she's from, Empress of Forever, is based on Journey to the West, and therefore she is Vegeta, who is possibly the all-time best frenemy.
She's not Vegeta.
What?
Zanj is Son Goku.
No.
Sun Wukong.
Okay, so she is, but when the other protagonist comes in, she plays the Vegeta role in the story. Okay,
she's the Monkey King.
That's fine. But anyway, the point is
Japanese
that
is Son Goku.
Turning enemies into friends is the whole thing that Journey of the West does, right? That's its main trope, is defeating bad guys and adding them to your party. and Zanj, being a sort of mad queen, world-killing entity, who becomes, the friend over the course of a very, very long book, I think wins that one as far as I'm concerned.
That's a really, honestly, I love Tal, but to be fair, it's hard to argue against the Monkey King as like lesbian super soldier space Monkey King as the best frenemy.
Awesome. I'll take that. I'll take that.
Despite Isaac, very good argumentation. Despite conflating Journey to the West and Dragon Ball Z, an anime loosely based on Journey to the West.
Yeah, I mean,
conflating them and getting the characters wrong.
Shush. I'm a real anime fan. I'm having to do too many jingles for this self-indulgent award show, so I'm gonna put a bunch of them together. Alexis thinks that Eanthe from Harrow the Ninth counts as a frenemy. I'm not sure. Also, as an anime fan, I apologize for my Dragon Ball Z crimes. For my crimes. And at some point, we should have mentioned Space Between Worlds, which is very good. So here goes. We should have had an award for worst mom, so the mom from Space Between Worlds gets it. Anyway, here's the segue to the very self-indulgent awards category, as if the rest of them weren't. Best jingle will be Lee's suggestion and Alexa's suggestion, because, I mean, modesty forbids me. And best episode will be my suggestion and Lee's suggestion, because Alexis doesn't listen to the podcast.
That's fair.
So, Lee, would you like to nominate a jingle?
Best jingle. Well, so I asked when I was told about this that if I could be given a jingle compilation, which turned out not to be possible. So I'm going to nominate the only jingle whose name I remember.
I mean, that's what a jingle is for.
Yes, and the reason I remember it is because it actually caused me quite an ethical quandary. In when you're a writer, part of the ethics is you're not supposed to tag writers in reviews of their own work, because writers should filter their own experience of reviews. Some people get really depressed reading positive reviews. Some people get really embarrassed reading negative reviews. Some people get really embarrassed reading positive reviews. So you just like let them make that decision themselves, except if you're very close to them. So, but also if someone wrote a guitar jingle based on something I wrote called Twink Wizard, and no one told me, I would be so upset. So I really had to wrestle with that one for a long time. So I'm nominating Twink Wizard.
Twink Wizard, yeah, which is based on the game over scene of a Sega racing game whose name I can't remember. It was called Sega Rally, yeah! Oh, I hit the mic. Alexis, what was your nomination for best jingle?
I'm going to be even more self-indulgent and nominate you putting my explanation of what Goju Romatsu is to music.
That was what I was expecting Lee to nominate, and it's certainly what I was expecting you to nominate.
I knew Lee was going to nominate Twink Wizard, because I remember Lee's ethical conundrum over Twink Wizard. But I would like to argue for the Goju Romatsu one, because it's funny, and because it was, one of the more collaborative jingles.
Yes.
And because it was genuinely educational.
Because I basically just took the Twink Wizard one from a previous existing piece of music, whereas the Goju Romatsu one is all original. I will call that the jingle of the year, and that is the one that I expected to win. All right, best episode. My favorite episode that we've done this year, and I'm partially shouting this out because I was looking at our stats, and it's, I think, our second least downloaded one at this point, which is partially because it's relatively recent, but also I think because it has a slur in the name of the book, is The Dyke and the Dybbuk. I think that we did a really good job with that episode, just in terms of both explaining why the book was good, but also in explaining the surrounding culture and the surrounding time. And I had a real hoot putting together the jingles for it. Lee, do you have a best episode nomination?
Yeah, my best episode nomination is Divine Endurance, because it led to me reading Divine Endurance. So, yep, that's the best episode.
What do you think, Alexis?
That's a tough one. If I'd been allowed to nominate one, it would be the Nine Fox Gambit one, because that's the one that got my girlfriend's dad to email me his thoughts on the Jewish calendrical debates.
I might add the Divine Endurance episode also got my dad to read Divine Endurance, and he didn't get it.
I think I got to give it to Divine Endurance. Like the fact that it got two additional people to read Divine Endurance and then feel sad. I think it does have to be the Divine Endurance episode.
Awesome.
It's actually a lot more than 2, because I then made a lot of people read Divine Endurance.
The fact that episode actually meaningfully expanded the amount of people who've read this really tragically underappreciated book.
And I would like to shout out Tumblr user Snarp for having recommended the book to me in the first place.
Years and years ago.
Yeah,
shout out to Snarp. Thank you, Snarp, for making us feel very sad.
Indeed. That is applicable in so many different ways. Anyway, so on to the retro awards then. Retro awards. So we have, first of all, most nostalgic and then best retro. And
for most nostalgic, I think I have to nominate The Dyke and the Divik.
Yeah, obviously.
It brings back the joy. Like, it brings back... It makes you remember the 90s when you still thought that the world could turn out well.
Yes. And as I mentioned, I really enjoyed both reading that book, doing the episode, and remembering a putative 90s London where things might possibly turn out okay. But best retro, I will go first. So the obvious answer is Divine Endurance. I'm nominating Divine Endurance for best retro. I think it's the single best book that we've read for the series.
Divine Endurance is very good. I'm going to nominate Fire Logic just because it has been one of, because I've just love it so much, and because it is a really good book about, older disabled people finding a happy life, or at least a life after war and trauma.
Have you read Fire Logic, Lee?
I have not read Fire Logic. I would like.
You have read Fire Logic, but you didn't remember it, so clearly
I have no recollection of reading Fire Logic.
I win by default. Default.
Just to clarify, my memory is terrible. I have a doctor's note. But I have to give it to Divine Endurance because I'm the judge, and I have to give it to the bleakest thing.
That's fair. No, that's fair.
You knew who I was when you invited me to do this.
Going into this,
yep.
I imagine that both of us expected the other to nominate Utena in this category. And
I was really surprised that neither of you nominated Utena, but honestly, I think Divine Endurance probably is the best of the retro books.
Yeah, and Utena, even though it is amazing, it has flaws, which we have enumerated. And
yes.
I'm not sure that Divine Endurance does have flaws.
Divine Endurance has flaws, but Divine Endurance is Utena is, amazing as it is also anime.
Yes.
And, Divine Endurance is such a singular thing.
Yeah.
I wasn't even aware that Utena could be in contention for that, but I probably would have chosen to give it to the book again because I'm biased.
Indeed. Writer's bias. Well, we chose the judge that we chose.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So, I'm kind of glad that I don't think that any one property has gotten more than 2 nominations. There's no runaway winner here, except the coveted Book of the Year award. And for this one, I think that Alexis and I will both read our top 3s.
All right.
And
why don't you go first?
Lee will choose number 1, assuming that our number 1s are not the same, which I suspect they might be. of the year. My top three. At number 3, She Who Became the Sun. A book that that made my top 3 because I had zero expectations for it, and it wildly exceeded those expectations.
That actually doesn't... You make that sound... If it had zero expectations, then it's really easy to exceed those expectations.
Oh, yeah. No, that's a good point. It would be more impressive if it wildly exceeded the expectation. You know what I'm talking about, though. Like, I mean... You did not come into it already favorably inclined.
Right.
It's like, I thought, oh, this is the gimmick, but it turns out that the book transcends the gimmickiness of the setup, I think. And even though I know the gimmickiness of the setup is one that you want for every single major figure in Chinese history, but
I do. It's true.
I think that it was...
We're gonna do it.
It was better than it needed to be, by a good margin. I really enjoyed that book. Number 2, I actually like Gideon the Ninth better than Harrow the Ninth. Gideon the Ninth is my number 2. I know that is somewhat controversial, but the actual experience of reading Harrow the Ninth is not super fun, in my opinion, even though, it comes out, as being a very, good and complicated bit of business. But my favorite of the crop is The Unspoken Name. What are your top 3, Alexis?
This is very difficult for me. But I'm going to go with being contrary.
Oh, no.
And not nominate She Who Became the Sun.
Oh.
Even though it is really good and I really liked it. I think my number 3 is actually Harrow the Ninth.
Okay.
I didn't like it very much on my first read through, but I read it a second time specifically for the podcast and liked it a lot more. And the third time, and then I read it a third time just to more carefully follow the themes. And it is a book that rewards multiple reading and even more so than Gideon the Ninth. And as somebody who rereads a lot, that's really valuable to me. And I think it's just doing more interesting things. My number 2 is A Desolation Called Peace. It's real good. It's just a really good book. And my number 1 is Nine Fox Gambit because I love it so.
I'm fucked. I'm fucked.
I mean, honestly, The Unspoken Name probably deserves it because The Unspoken Name is the book that most exemplifies
the Wizards versus Lesbians
podcast.
mockery genre.
But I absolutely
crucially, the Nine Fox Gambit is the one that
Gambit.
leaves red.
Yeah, and I do really like it.
They're a big fan of it, also.
I'm actually gonna give it to The Unspoken Name because
victory for me. Victory for Isaac. The Wizards won this one, everybody. Hooray.
I have some residual guilt over not finishing The Unspoken Name because the wizard was so skeevy that he skeeved me out across the barrier of fiction and I couldn't keep reading.
That's good. No, that was the appropriate decision to make as the judge. I just decided to be true to myself because Isaac had already nominated 2 of the 3 I was planning on nominating.
Nine Fox Gambit is an incredible book. Everyone should read it. But The Unspoken Name really exemplifies what you're trying to do here on the podcast as I understand it. And so I'm going to give it to The Unspoken Name.
All right. Congratulations.
Sorry, Yoon, if you're listening to this.
Congratulations, A.K. Larkwood.
If you're listening to this, Yoon, why?
Yeah.
But,
a framed certificate is on its way to you now. The inaugural Wizzly winner for The Unspoken Name. Also having taken home 3 awards this evening and with a lot of other properties tied for second. So congratulations, A.K. Larkwood. And this has been an incredibly self-indulgent exercise, but I've enjoyed it.
So have I.
It has been an experience.
Thank you, Lee, for for
enduring
coming
this,
along on for
involunteering.
doing this. We
it's fine.
appreciate your sacrifice.
As soon as someone told me that the whale wasn't going to be eligible for the whale award, I was like, I have to do this so I can hijack it. So
That's fair. Well, you know what? If the opportunity to hijack the award so that you could give it to the unnominated and disqualified whale is what gets you to be the judge for these awards, then thank you once again to Raphael Carter.
Excellent. Okay. So, this, I believe that given the order that this is going to come out in, the next thing that you will get from us is when
is this coming out?
This umming and ahhing. It's coming out on the 1 year anniversary, which means that the next thing that is going to come out after it is going to be Girls of Paper and Fire isn't even going. I forgot about Girl Serpent Thorn. Girls of Paper and Fire isn't even going to be out by the time this comes out. So I'm going to have to edit all of that out because it.
You don't have to edit all of it out.
It didn't win, so that's fine.
It's foreshadowing.
I nominated something, but the next thing that's going to come out is in fact Girls of Paper and Fire. So if you want to know about the Ninja Clan Soul Survivor rape harem festivities, yeah, I wouldn't recommend reading that, but I would recommend listening to our podcast, Wizards vs. Lesbians. See you next week.
We've definitely put a good case for listening to the podcast today. That's.
Hey, you made us read that.
Look. Your goal is to stay at 50 subscribers, right? So.
My goal is to stay at 5 subscribers.
You've already overshot. Well, maybe you can drop a dozen or so from the award show.
Good job, award show.
And good job, everybody. And if you're still listening, why? And also, have a good evening, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, everyone.